I've been a seasonal ranger at Black Pine Wilderness for 8 summers. Not because I love the view, though. The jagged spine of Sentinel Ridge cuts the dawn sky like a blade, sharp enough to split memory from longing. Not for the solitude, though. Some days the only voice I hear is my own, echoing off canyon walls until it sounds like someone else answering back. I stay because out here, the world makes sense in a way it never did back in the city, where everything felt provisional, temporary, built on sand. Here, trees grow toward light with patient certainty. Rivers carve their own paths through stone without asking permission. Animals leave tracks you can read like sentences. Coyotes trot hurried, opportunistic. Elk stagger, heavy, deliberate. Bears heavy lope, ground shaking, sovereign. Everything has a reason, a rhythm, a place. Even the wind knows its name in these pines. Until last week. It started with the light. Not a plane blinking through high clouds. Not a satellite drifting on its silent orbit. Not even the flicker of distant campfires from illegal squatters or lost hikers. A single white orb hovering over Sentinel Ridge every night at precisely 3:17 a.m. No sound, no movement, just watching. Steady as a star, but lower, closer, wrong. It didn't flicker like bioluminescent fungus or pulse like drone LEDs. It held its shape, its position, its silence, with an intention that made my skin prickle even through layers of wool and canvas. I logged it in the duty book with clinical detachment. Unidentified aerial phenomenon, stationary white luminescence, no thermal signature, duration 12-18 minutes. Called it into dispatch. Static crackled for 10 seconds. Then a tired voice said, "Probably Venus. You're at high elevation. Clear skies, Venus gets bright this time of year. Seen it myself up near Glacier." But Venus doesn't vanish the moment you raise binoculars to your eyes. Venus doesn't drift 10 degrees west when you shift your stance to get a better angle. Venus doesn't follow you through the trees when you hike back from checking trail markers after dusk, staying just beyond the edge of your headlamp beam like a shadow with its own gravity. 2 nights ago, I woke not to the usual chorus of great horned owls calling across the valley or the whisper of wind through ponderosa pines, but to silence. Not quiet, not stillness. True silence, the kind that presses against your eardrums like deep water, like standing inside a vacuum chamber, like the forest had been unplugged, no owls, no crickets, no rustle of deer in the underbrush. Even Black Creek, which babbles year-round over smooth basalt stones, had gone mute, no gurgle, no splash. Just dry bedrock exposed in the moonlight, though rain had fallen 2 days prior. The air itself felt thick, charged, as if holding its breath, waiting for something to break. And outside my cabin, the light, 10 feet off the ground, 20 yards into the meadow, just beyond the ring of fire-scarred firs left from the '09 burn, pulsing softly, not flashing, not strobing, breathing, like a slow, steady heartbeat made visible, radiating a warmth I could feel in my chest despite the freezing air. I grabbed my rifle habit, not fear, and stepped onto the porch, boots crunching on frost-dusted pine needles. The moment my foot touched the bottom step, the light dimmed. Not switched off, not fled, just acknowledged me. As if it had been waiting for me to notice it, noticing me. The gesture was so human, so deliberate, it chilled me more than any threat ever could. Then it rose smooth, silent, no disturbance in the air, no ripple in the mist, and vanished into the low cloud layer without a trace, as if it had never been anything more than a trick of exhaustion and altitude. That morning, I found my coffee already made. Black, no sugar. Exactly how I take it. On the porch table, beside the logbook, steam still rising in thin curls despite the 28 degrees Fahrenheit air. I hadn't touched the pot, hadn't even lit the stove. The percolator sat cold on the counter, lid closed, grounds untouched in their tin. The mug was warm to the touch, the ceramic familiar under my fingers, the one chipped during the 18 storm when a branch crashed through the window. I didn't drink it, poured it slowly onto the frozen earth, watching the dark liquid vanish into snow like an offering returned to the ground. I checked my radio logs later, scrolling back through the digital archive with numb fingers. Found a transmission timestamped 3:19 a.m., my voice calm and clear, all quiet, no issues. I never sent that. Never would. In 8 years, I've never used the phrase, no issues. Too vague, too civilian, too soft. I say, sector secure, or perimeter stable, or negative contact. No issues is what tourists say when they mean, I didn't see anything scary, or worse, I wasn't paying attention. And I don't sound like that. My voice on comms is clipped, efficient, stripped of all unnecessary syllables. This was soft. Resigned, like someone who'd stopped fighting, who'd finally understood that resistance was the real illusion. Yesterday, needing proof, or maybe just needing to move, to feel my muscles burn instead of my mind race, I hiked to the ridge at first light, checked every inch of the eastern slope for scorch marks, landing struts, drone debris, anything human, anything explainable. Used my thermal scope, my metal detector, even sifted soil samples through a fine mesh. Found nothing. No footprints but my own, no broken branches, no unnatural heat signatures, no fibers, no residue, no electromagnetic anomalies, but on a flat basalt stone near the summit, my thermos. The old stainless one dented from a fall down Devil's Gulch in 19, the dent shaped like a crescent moon, full of hot coffee. Steam rising in the thin mountain air, vanishing into the blue haze, and beside it a single pine cone from a lodgepole pine, arranged perfectly upright on its base, scales aligned with geometric precision, each bract pointing true north like a compass needle, not dropped, not blown there by wind, placed like an offering, or a signal, or a test. Last night, I didn't sleep. Sat by the window with my rifle across my knees, watching the digital clock tick toward 3:17 like a countdown to inevitability. When the numbers flipped, the light appeared not on the ridge, but just beyond the tree line, 50 yards from the cabin, closer than ever, brighter, more defined. I could see now that it wasn't perfectly round. It had depth, texture, like a sphere of condensed mist holding its shape against physics. I stepped outside without hesitation. Boots unlaced, jacket open, hat forgotten on the hook. The cold bit, but I barely felt it. My body knew something my mind was only beginning to accept. The light didn't move, didn't pulse faster, just hung there, waiting, patient as bedrock. I walked toward it, slow, deliberate, each step measured, grounded. With every footfall, the air grew colder, not winter cold, not the dry bite of high-altitude frost, but an empty cold. The kind you feel standing in an abandoned house long after the family's gone, or staring into a well at midnight and hearing your own breath echo back from somewhere it shouldn't. A cold that doesn't come from temperature, but from absence. Like walking into a room with no walls, no floor, no sky, just void wearing the shape of forest, and within it something watching with ancient eyes. 10 feet away, I stopped. Breath fogging in slow pulses. Heart steady now, not racing calm, like before a storm breaks. The light pulsed once, brighter, warmer. For a second, I saw not white, but gold, like sunlight trapped in amber resin, like the glow inside a raven's eye at dawn. Then, a voice. Not from the orb, not from the trees, from behind me. Close enough to stir the hair on my neck, close enough to feel the warmth of its breath on my ear. My voice, but softer, worn smooth by years I haven't lived yet, by centuries of wind through pines, by the slow erosion of time on stone. You don't need to leave. I spun around, rifle half raised, finger tense on the trigger. Nothing. Just the cabin, dark and silent. Windows reflecting starlight like dead eyes. The porch, empty. The meadow, still. But on the cabin door, my handprint. Fresh. Damp. Left palm, fingers spread wide, pressed against the weathered wood with gentle pressure, facing outward, like someone had just stepped out. Like I'd been standing there moments before, looking back at myself with understanding. This morning I found my journal open on the desk. I'd closed it last night, tucked under the radio like a shield. Now it lay centered on the scarred pine surface, weighted by the river stone I keep from my first summer here, a smooth black oval from Black Creek, worn by centuries of flow. Open to a blank page, except for one new entry in my handwriting. Same ink, same slant, same pressure on the downstrokes, same slight hook on the T. It's not taking me, it's becoming me, so the watch never ends. I didn't write that, but I believe it. Because part of me, the part that's been lonely since my brother died in that wildfire up north, the part that talks to the ravens like they understand, the part that leaves extra food on the stump for the old coyote with the missing ear wants to stay, to stand on this ridge forever, watching, waiting. being watched back by something older than borders, older than rangers, older than the word wilderness. Something that doesn't want to consume me, but to complete me. I left my pack inside. My satellite phone, my badge, my maps, all the proof I was ever part of the world beyond these pines. They simply aren't necessary anymore. The forest doesn't care about credentials. It cares about presence. But my cup remains on the porch. Ceramic. Chipped at the rim from a fall during the 18 storm, steam curling in delicate spirals against the cold air, coffee, black, real. I didn't make it, didn't fill the kettle, didn't measure the grounds, but I'll drink it because the one who left it, whether ghost, guardian, or the land itself speaking through my own hands, knows I'm ready to stop running, ready to trade reports for presence, ready to become part of the silence I've spent 8 summers guarding, not as an outsider, but as its voice. If you find this journal, don't come looking. Don't send search parties with drones and thermal cameras and loud voices that shatter the stillness. Don't speak my name over the radio unless you're prepared to hear it answered in the wind, in the creak of timber, in the silence between heartbeats. Just check the ridge at 3:17 a.m. Stand where I stood. Face east. Breathe slow. Let the cold seep into your bones until you forget you're separate from the earth. If you see a light, not a headlamp, not a star, not a reflection, but something that watches with patience, with recognition, with sorrow and welcome, don't wave, don't speak, don't raise your rifle. Just nod. He'll know you understand. And if you hear a ranger's voice whisper your name from the trees, not loud, not urgent, just a breath of sound between the pines, carrying the scent of pine resin and old snow, don't answer. Don't turn, don't call out, walk slower, make space in your awareness. Let the silence settle around you like snow, like forgiveness. He's not lost. He's the reason the coyotes fall silent at 3:17. He's the warmth in the cup left on the porch in freezing air. He's the handprint on the door that faces outward, not fleeing, but welcoming. He's the watcher who finally let himself be seen. He's the voice that says sector secure, not to dispatch, but to the stars. He's home. I came to the heart of Borneo to map the migration routes of the Bornean orangutan, not to meet the dead, not to chase whispers that coil through peat swamp forests like smoke from unseen fires. I came for science, for GPS coordinates, camera trap footage, behavioral logs that might convince distant bureaucrats to halt the spread of palm oil plantations devouring this ancient ecosystem. My reasons were practical. My equipment precise. Motion sensor cameras sealed against humidity. A satellite uplink that crackled more than it carried voice. A field journal filled with grids and timestamps and the careful notations of a man who believes in measurable reality. I am a primatologist. A rationalist. I trust what instruments record, not what the mind conjures in isolation. I came here because the silence appealed to me, not the absence of sound, but the absence of demand. No emails, no grant deadlines, no voices asking things of me, just the slow pulse of a forest older than memory. But the forest doesn't care about your intentions. It only cares if your footsteps are heavy with arrogance or light with respect. My camp is deep in the Kapua's Hulu, nestled in a bend where the river forks into 1,000 black veins, each one carrying secrets from mountains no map names. The canopy is so thick that noon feels like twilight, a perpetual green gloom where sunlight filters through in fractured beams, illuminating dust motes and drifting spores like slow ghosts. The air doesn't just hang, it presses. Wet, warm, clinging to your skin like a second layer, smelling of decaying figs, rotting lianas, and something older, deeper, wet stone from a forgotten well, the scent of earth before the first rain. At night, the trees don't drip, they sigh. A slow exhalation that makes the leaves shiver, a sound felt in the chest more than heard by the ears. You learn to sleep with your mouth open, breathing in the forest's breath until your own lungs forget their rhythm. I've been alone 7 weeks, long enough for the city self to slough away like dead bark, long enough to learn the true silence not as absence, but as presence. Orangutans grunt at dawn, their calls muffled by mist, low and guttural, a language of reassurance between mothers and infants hidden in the high canopy. I've recorded 3 distinct family groups, noted their feeding patterns, their avoidance of areas near logging roads. None of them vocalize after sunset. That was my first clue that something here operates by rules no field guide documents. Hornbills glide silent over the canopy by midday, great pied hornbills with wingspans wider than my arms, shadows passing over shadows, their flight so effortless it seems they're not moving at all, but the forest is flowing beneath them. At dusk, the cicadas stop. Not all at once, one by one, like lights being switched off down a long corridor, until the last holdout falls silent. Then comes the breath hold. 3 minutes where even the frogs forget how to croak, where the wind dies between one rustle and the next, where the very air seems to pause mid-inhale. Locals call it nafas hutan, the forest breath. During those 3 minutes, you don't move. You don't speak. You simply exist, waiting to see if you're worthy of being noticed. That's when I first felt it. Night 43. I was checking my camera traps near a strangler fig, its roots coiled like sleeping serpents around the host tree, bark slick with moss and condensation. The breath hold had just settled. I felt the shift before I saw anything. A pressure change in the air, the sense of being regarded not with threat, but with ancient patience. Like the space behind me had thickened, grown dense with attention. The hairs on my neck stood up. I turned slowly, rifle within reach, but not in hand. Nothing. Just the green gloom and the smell of wet earth and decaying fruit. But on the mossy trunk of the fig, at eye level, 3 parallel scratches, fresh, deep, Not claw marks too straight, too evenly spaced, too deliberate, like a signature or a question. I didn't run, didn't raise my voice. I bowed my head the way the old man in Putusabo taught me before I left, his hands gnarled like tree roots, his eyes milky with cataracts but sharp as flint. "The forest sees pride," he'd said, pressing a strip of white bark into my palm. "It eats it. Walk like you carry water on your head. Light, careful, listening." That night, unable to sleep, I checked my gear before bed. My water filter, I'd left it inside, disassembled on its hook to dry after filtering the tannin black river water. Now it sat on a flat stone by the riverbank, clean, assembled, filled with clear water. Impossible. The river here runs black as ink, thick with tannins from decaying vegetation, staining everything it touches. This water was clear as glass, reflecting the weak starlight like a mirror. I didn't drink it. Poured it carefully onto the moss beside the stone, a gesture I didn't understand but felt compelled to make. The scent lingered. Clean, cold, like mountain springs I hadn't tasted since childhood. Next morning, my journal lay open on my sleeping mat. I'd closed it the night before, tucked beneath my pillow. Now it rested precisely centered, weighted by a smooth river stone I kept in my pack. Open to yesterday's entry. Orangutan group Gamma observed near tributary 4. Juvenile male exhibited nest-building behavior. Weather, overcast, 32°C. Below it in my handwriting, same blue ink, same slight rightward slant, I developed copying field notes as a student a new line. He is not angry. He is waiting for you to ask. I never wrote that. But the pen pressure on the downstrokes, the way the tail of the Y curled upward, mine. Uncannily, impossibly mine. I ran my fingers over the letters. The ink bled slightly, just like mine does in this humidity, yet the page smelled faintly of wet stone and old bark. 2 days later, needing to check my northern traps and clear my head, I followed a trail of broken branches too precise for animal passage, too fresh for storm damage. It led me to a clearing I'd never seen on any satellite image or topographic map. In the center stood a single Kayu Puti tree, white wood, sacred to the Dayak, its bark peeled in long, deliberate strips, revealing the pale flesh beneath. Tied to its trunk with rattan vine, dyed black with iron-rich mud, hung a small bundle of bones, not animal. Human finger bones, yellowed with age, strung on a cord of black fiber woven with orchid roots. A pusaka, an heirloom, left not as a warning, but as an offering, a bridge. Last night, I woke to a sound like stones grinding together deep underground. Not an earthquake, not the groan of shifting timber, a voice. It didn't come from the woods. It came from inside my own skull, resonating in the hollows behind my eyes, speaking in a language that had no words, only meaning. You walk on our bones, you breathe our air. Will you listen or will you leave? I grabbed my headlamp, heart hammering against my ribs, and stepped outside into the suffocating dark. The fog was so thick I couldn't see my hand. But on the path leading away from camp footprints, Bare feet, large. The stride too long for any human I'd met in the longhouses along the river. And between the toes, strands of fine black hair that glistened like wet spider silk, catching the faint beam of my lamp before vanishing into mist. I didn't follow, didn't call out, just stood there until sweat cooled on my skin, knowing with a certainty that bypassed reason, the scratches on the fig weren't a threat. They were an invitation, a test. The forest wasn't demanding I leave. It was asking if I was ready to stay not as a visitor, but as a witness. This morning, dawn barely a suggestion behind the canopy, I found my satellite phone at the base of the Kayupudi tree, screen cracked, battery dead, useless. All my data, my maps, my proof of existence in the modern world gone. And beside it, my field knife. Clean, sharp, placed handle first toward me, the way a gift is offered in Dayak tradition, a tool, or a key. I left my pack by the tree, my maps, my data drives, all the proof I was ever here. They simply weren't necessary anymore. But my cup remains on the mossy root where I left it yesterday afternoon. Clay. Chipped at the rim from a fall in the market at Sintang. Steam curling in delicate spirals against the damp air. Black coffee. No sugar. I didn't make it. Didn't fill the kettle. Didn't measure the grounds. But I'll drink it. Because the one who left it, whether forest spirit or the quiet truth I've spent a lifetime outrunning, knows I've stopped asking questions. Knows that 7 weeks of silence has worn me down to the bone. That the memory of my mentor's laugh has faded until only the shape of his absence remains. That sometimes a man in the deep peat swamp would trade every rational explanation for the simple comfort of a cup made by hands that understand his habits. If you find this journal, don't come looking. Don't send search parties with radios and thermal cameras. Don't speak my name in these woods unless you're prepared to hear it answered in the sigh of leaves. Just leave a strip of white bark at the base of the Kayupudi tree. Lay it gently, facing east the way villagers leave offerings for Antu, the spirits of the forest. Then walk away without looking back, without listening for footsteps behind you. And if you hear a man humming a Dayak lullaby from the tree line, the one about the hornbill carrying stars in its beak, the melody my mentor sang while setting camera traps in the rain, don't answer. Don't turn. Don't raise your rifle. Walk slower. Make space in your awareness. Let the silence fill the space between your steps. He's not lost. He's learning the language of roots, the slow speech of mycelium networks, the creak of ancient timber, the whisper of water through peat. He's becoming part of the breath hold, the watcher in the green gloom, the reason orangutans fall silent when a stranger walks alone. The forest breathes. He breathes with it. And somewhere deep in the heart of Borneo, a great ape lifts its head not toward the path, but toward the Kayupudi tree sniffing the air, eyes wise with centuries, sensing the new presence that walks these slopes now. Not ghost, not memory, but guardian, keeper of the silence between heartbeats. One more thread woven into the forest's endless, breathing tapestry, waiting for the next lonely man to arrive with his instruments and his need for quiet, ready to learn his habits, ready to make him coffee, ready to show him that some solitudes are not empty but full of belonging. He's home. I came to Kalimantan to study clouded leopards, not spirits, not the whispers that coil through peat swamp forests when the mist thickens and the world shrinks to the space between heartbeats. I came for science, for camera trap footage of Neofelis diardi moving through the understory, for scat analysis to map their dwindling territory, for data points to add to a conservation report that might, just might, slow the spread of palm oil plantations devouring this ancient ecosystem. My reasons were practical, my equipment precise. Motion sensor cameras sealed against humidity, GPS trackers calibrated for dense canopy, a field journal filled with grids and timestamps, and the careful notations of a man who believes in measurable reality. I am a wildlife biologist, a rationalist. I trust what instruments record, not what the mind conjures in isolation. I came here because the silence appealed to me, not the absence of sound, but the absence of demand. No emails, no grant deadlines, no voices asking things of me, just the slow pulse of a forest older than memory. But the forest doesn't care what you came for. It only cares if you're quiet enough to hear it breathing. My camp sits deep in West Kalimantan, nestled in a bend of the Kapuas River where the water winds like a black serpent through endless peat swamp. The air is always wet, not with rain, but with a perpetual exhalation from the soil itself, a moisture that clings to your skin like a second layer, seeps into your clothing until fabric forgets its dryness, beads on your eyelashes when you blink too slowly. At night, the trees drip, not rain, just condensation pulled from the sky by roots older than memory, older than kingdoms, older than the first human who ever stood here and felt small. You learn the rhythms after weeks like these. Hornbills call at dawn with deep, echoing booms that vibrate through your chest, their voices carrying across valleys like questions without answers. Gibbons scream midday long, piercing calls that slice through the humid air, territorial declarations that echo for miles. At dusk, everything stops, not gradually, abruptly, as if a switch is flipped deep in the earth. The frogs cease their nightly chorus mid-croak. The insects fall silent. Even the drip of moisture from branches halts for 3 full minutes, the time it takes a stick of incense to burn down in the longhouses along the river. That's when I first saw him. Day 32. I was filtering river water through my ceramic purifier, the slow drip filling my canteen with clean, cool liquid. The silence had just settled. I felt the shift in the air before I saw him, a cooling along my spine, the sense of being regarded not with threat, but with ancient patience. At the riverbank, where the black water lapped at mossy roots, stood a man in tattered field clothes, the same khaki shirt and cargo pants I wore, sun-bleached and stained with mud, exactly like my own. Barefoot on the slick stones, face shadowed by a wide rattan hat worn smooth by rain and time. He didn't speak, didn't move. Just watch me perform this mundane ritual, filtering water, checking the flow rate, waiting for the forest's breath hold to pass. I nodded the way I'd seen local Dayak guides do near sacred trees. A slight dip of the chin, hands pressed together not in prayer but in acknowledgement. Not worship, recognition. He vanished like mist burning off at sunrise. Not with a flicker or fade, simply ceased to occupy space, as if he'd been a trick of light and shadow all along. But the air where he'd stood remained cool long after, and the drip from my filter slowed to a stop as if repelled by invisible breath. That night, I found my thermos outside my tent. I'd left it inside, empty, beside my sleeping mat after the last sip of coffee. Now it sat centered on a mossy log 3 meters from my door flap, cap screwed on tight, still warm to the touch. I unscrewed it slowly, full of hot black coffee, just how I make it. 2 scoops of coarse ground beans brewed in boiling river water. No sugar, a single drop of condensed milk from the tin I'd brought in Pontianak. Steam rose in a steady plume, vanishing into the humid air near the canopy. I didn't drink it, poured it carefully onto the moss beside the log, a gesture I didn't understand but felt compelled to make. The scent lingered for hours, dark roast and river water, and memory. Next morning, my journal lay open on the mossy log. I'd closed it the night before, tucked under my pillow. Now it rested precisely centered on the wood grain, weighted by a smooth river stone I kept in my pack. Open to yesterday's entry. No leopard sightings. Camera trap 4 malfunctioning, likely humidity damage. Weather, overcast 31°C. Below it in my handwriting, same blue ink, same pressure on the downstrokes, a new line. They're teaching you to listen. Don't speak unless the forest asks. I never wrote that. But the slant of the T's, the way the I's were dotted with a slight rightward flick, mine. Uncannily, impossibly mine. I ran my fingers over the letters. The ink was dry, hours old. Yet the page smelled faintly of orchids and wet earth. 2 days later, needing to check my northern camera traps and clear my head, I hiked to the burial tree, a massive ironwood, so ancient its trunk measured 20 men around, wrapped in faded red cloth tied by generations of villagers. Human bones, bleached white by sun and rain, tucked carefully in its hollows like offerings. Locals call it Poon Tuan, the ancestor tree. They say it holds the memories of those who walked before, that it speaks to those who listen with more than ears. They say it doesn't harm the humble, only watches, only reminds. On its roots sat a single clay cup, my cup. The one I'd bought in a riverside market near Sintang, hand-thrown, glazed in earth tones, chipped at the rim from years of fieldwork. Inside coffee, still warm, the scent unmistakable, dark roast, condensed milk, river water boiled just long enough, and beside it, my spare field gloves. Neatly folded one inside the other, the way the Dayak elders taught me to store things properly during my first expedition here years ago. Impossible. I'd left them zipped in the inner pocket of my pack, sealed against monsoon damp. Last night, I woke to whispering, not from the radio, not from the wind finding a crack in the tent fabric. From the woods themselves, a voice carried on air, so still it shouldn't carry sound at all. Not Malay, not English, just my voice. The exact timbre, the slight rasp from a childhood bout of dengue fever, the cadence I use when speaking to myself while working. Soft, calm, you don't need to leave. The river will keep you. It has kept others. It will keep you well. I grabbed my headlamp, chambered around in my rifle out of habit rather than fear, and stepped outside into the thick night. The fog was dense, silent. Not a single leaf stirred. But on the path leading away from camp, a single bare footprint. Size matching mine, narrow, arched, toes splayed slightly as if accustomed to earth rather than leather. Leading into the trees, vanishing into the black wall of dipterocarp forest 200 meters out. I didn't follow, didn't call out, just stood there until sweat cooled on my skin, knowing with a certainty that bypassed reason. Whoever made that print wasn't behind it, wasn't ahead of it, was already wearing my name, was already learning the weight of my coat, the rhythm of my breath, the way I take my coffee. This morning dawned barely a suggestion behind the mist. I found my passport on the burial tree roots, open to my photo. A single orchid pressed over my face. Phalaenopsis amabilis, the moon orchid, petals still dewy, fragrance sharp and sweet in the humid air, and beside it my boots, neatly placed, sole to sole, laces tied in perfect double knots the way I never tie them. I always rush, leaving loops loose, promising myself I'll retie them on the trail. These were tight, secure, ready for a journey. I didn't go back to camp, just stood there, sweat cooling on my skin, listening past the thump of my own heart. From within the trees, a kettle whistled, the thin, reedy sound of boiling water reaching its crescendo, then stopped. Not with a clatter of being lifted from the fire, not with the hiss of water hitting hot iron, but with a gentle click, the precise sound of the trivet being lifted and set aside carefully, the way I do, always. Because the Dayak elder who taught me said, a rushed hand invites accidents. I left my pack by the tree. My satellite radio too, the one I'd planned to use tomorrow to call base and request early extraction. They simply weren't necessary anymore. But my cup remains on the mossy root where I left it yesterday afternoon. Clay, chipped at the rim from a fall in the Sintang market years ago. Steam curling in delicate spirals against the damp air. Coffee. Black. Real. I didn't make it, didn't fill the kettle, didn't measure the grounds, but I'll drink it. Because the one who left it, whether forest spirit or the quiet truth, I've spent a lifetime outrunning, knows I'm tired of being alone. Knows that 6 weeks of silence has worn me down to the bone, that the memory of my mentor's laugh has faded until only the shape of his absence remains, that sometimes a man in the deep peat swamp would trade every rational explanation for the simple comfort of a cup made by hands that understand his habits. If you find this journal, don't come looking. Don't send search parties with radios and thermal cameras. Don't speak my name aloud in these woods unless you're prepared to hear it answered in your own voice. Just leave an orchid at the base of the red cloth tree. Moon orchid if you can find it, any bloom if you must. Lay it gently, petals facing the river the way villagers leave offerings for Puntuan, the ancestor tree of old tales. Then walk away without looking back, without listening for footsteps behind you. And if you hear a man humming a field song from the tree line, the one about planting rice along the kapuas, the melody my mentor sang while setting camera traps in the rain, don't answer. Don't call out. Don't raise your rifle. Walk slower. Make space in your awareness. Let the song pass through you like mist through dipterocarps. He's not lost. He's home. I set down the journal. The campfire dies not with a crackle but a sigh, embers collapsing into ash without heat. I don't reach for more wood. Light is no longer necessary here. I can see perfectly in the mist now, not with eyes, but with the forest's awareness. The ferns part before me without rustle. The ironwood trees bow slightly as I pass, their branches releasing small clouds of moisture like blessings. I lift the cup, The coffee is still warm. I drink slowly, tasting not bitterness but belonging, the mineral depth of Blackwater rivers, the patience of ancient peat, the quiet joy of roots drinking deep beneath swamp. When it's empty, I place it gently on the mossy root beside the gloves. It will wait there for the next one, the one who comes listening instead of recording. The one who hears the 3-minute silence not as emptiness but as invitation. I step away from the tree without looking back. My body moves differently now, lighter, sure-footed, on the forest floor without boots, without fear. I walk toward the riverbank where the Kapwas flows black and still, reflecting nothing. Halfway there, I pause. Turn back toward the south, where Pontianak glows faintly through atmospheric haze far beyond the horizon, where my sister is probably making coffee in her cramped apartment, humming that same field song without knowing why it comforts her today. I open my mouth, no sound comes out, but the forest carries it anyway, a vibration through root and stone and river water. The apology I never spoke for leaving home. The gratitude I never voiced for her monthly letters that arrived even when I didn't reply. The simple truth. I am well. I am whole. I am where I was meant to be. The mist swirls in response. Not wind, acknowledgement. I turn and walk into the trees. They part without sound. My feet touch earth that has never known shoe leather. And for the first time since I was a boy, hiding under the bed during thunderstorms, listening to my mentor's footsteps approach, I am not afraid of the quiet. I am the quiet. I am the 3-minute stillness that makes frogs fall silent. I am the steam rising from a cup left for the lonely. I am the footstep behind you on the trail that isn't yours, yet feels familiar. The forest breathes, I breathe with it, and somewhere deep in the peat swamp, a clouded leopard lifts its head not toward the path but toward the burial tree, sniffing the air, ears twitching, sensing the new presence that walks these slopes now. Not ghost, not memory, but guardian. Keeper of the silence between heartbeats. One more thread woven into the forest's endless, breathing tapestry. Waiting for the next lonely man to arrive with his instruments and his need for quiet. Ready to learn his habits. Ready to make him coffee. Ready to show him that some solitudes are not empty, but full of belonging.